Hi, I'm Luisa.
And Michael.
And we are Retired Life Mexico. Welcome back if you've been here before, and welcome if you've never been here before. Thanks for joining us, friends. We are so happy to share our experiences here in Mexico as retired people. And of course, remember, this is our experience. We aren't trying to convince you of anything or convince anybody of anything. We are just trying to share our experience about how much we enjoy being retired, living in Mexico. Today, we're going to share how we learned Spanish or how we are continuing to learn Spanish.
Continuing.
Yes. And so, first, I'm going to tell you my story, and then Michael will tell you his story because they are very different. And then we'll get back to what we plan to do after that. So, stay with us. Okay, so I'm going to tell you my story because mine is a lot different than Michael's. And he doesn't need to sit here and listen to it again because he's heard it probably 100 times. But it's my story about how I learned Spanish. And what I find, why I'm chuckling is because, you see on the YouTubes, people say, learn Spanish in 30 days, how I became fluent in 30 days, or you too can be fluent in my program, whatever. Well, I'm not here to sell you a program. I don't want to teach Spanish anymore. I will help people if they have questions, but I retired as a Spanish teacher. But my story begins long before I became a teacher. So, what happened was in high school, I didn't take any Spanish classes. Like a lot of people take 2 years of Spanish and then they go on to college and take some more. Well, I was more into reading and writing English. I loved the English language. So I filled up my schedules with English classes. And then my senior year, I had a friend that I had met from Germany, and she was an exchange student. And I was so intrigued by that. I said, I think I want to be an exchange student. Where would I go? Well, I didn't really want to learn German. I don't know why. I picked Spanish. I said, let me try Spanish. And so I started to look into it, and I went to the language teacher who I'd never met before. And I said, could I be an exchange student? She said, sure. So I signed up with a company. I think it was called International Friendship Service or something like that. And this was in the 70s, remember, 1976. No phones, no computers. Well, we had phones, but not cell phones. And so I signed up to go the last semester of my high school year. No, I did not go to prom that year. I didn't graduate with my class that year. I graduated, but I didn't go to the service. Anyway, I went to Mexico and I went to the city of Puebla. And the funny part about that story is I was 18. I had just turned 18 in December. So this is now January. And I get off the plane in Mexico City. I was supposed to be met by the family that I was going to stay for 6 months with. The family didn't show up. There was nobody there to meet me. So I kind of stood around waiting. Picture this, 1976, 18 years old. I had the blonde hair looking like Marsha from the Brady Bunch. And as white as I am now. So here I am standing in Mexico City's airport waiting for, I don't know who's going to come pick me up. And some young man who is probably 30-ish, remember I was 18, he comes up and says, has a sign with my name on it. And he says, hey, Luisa, you're supposed to come with me. And I'm like, who are you? He said, I'm the director of the program here in Mexico City. And he spoke English, thank goodness. And your family can't meet you until tomorrow. So you're coming to my apartment for the night and they'll meet you there tomorrow. I was like, okay, picture that. 18 years old, going with this 30-something guy to his apartment over the night to meet my family tomorrow. I was very trusting and I had nothing else that I could do. And nothing bad happened, so it was fine. So the next day, the family came and picked me up, the dad and the mom, and two of the kids. One was Esther, she was 18, my age, and the other one was Yolanda, who spoke a little bit of English, thank goodness. So we drive the 2 hour drive from Mexico City to Puebla. To this day, I don't know where we went. I can't even remember the name of the street because all I had at that time was a post office box where I could get mail. And I got mail maybe 3 times in the 6 months I was there because Mexico's mail system, not so great. So I didn't speak any Spanish. I had never taken a class. I did have a little bitty dictionary, and the dictionary doesn't conjugate verbs or anything. So I'm speaking with a terrible gringo accent. And oh, it was awful. The school I was supposed to go to the next day or so, the family took me to the University of the Americas in Cholula. And this was going to be great. I was going to be a student in the university, supposedly just to learn Spanish. So I get enrolled and I'm all excited. And after 3 days, the school, I don't know who, but something happened where the school shut down. They tell me now, I learned over the years that the teachers went on strike. Okay, I have no clue what's going on. All I know is I'm being told no more school. And I had no resources, right? I couldn't call somebody to say, this isn't working out. The school's closed down. Now what do I do? I had nobody to call. And I wasn't calling my parents because if I had called them, they would have said, you're coming home. And I didn't want to come home. So after a couple of days of hanging out at the house, the family found me a different school to go to. Turns out it was an all-boys Catholic school called Colegio Benemente. And I have seen that one since we've gone back to visit Puebla over the years. It's still there, and it's not an all-boys Catholic school anymore. And when I was there were about 5 girls my age. I don't know why they were there, but I was there because there was no place else for me. And remember, I didn't speak any Spanish. And so I was the white girl in the back of the classroom, not speaking anything to anybody. And I wrote a lot of letters, like a diary kind of thing, in English. And the teachers moved the classrooms in Mexico. So you are sitting in a cold, dark classroom, not a lot of windows, as I recall. And the teachers would come and go, and I'd just be like, hola. I mean, I learned a couple words that I picked up out of the dictionary and from hearing other people greet each other. I also learned the word Weita, which at that time I thought they were saying gorita, which means little fatty. And I was like, why are they calling me fat? I wasn't fat. I didn't understand that. Um, it was fun for a day. No, it was never fun. After about a week, I realized nobody cared if I was in the class. So I became a dropout. I was dropped off at the front of the school and I just walked. Maybe I waited around till the lady who dropped me off, the family mom, she dropped me off, and then I would just leave the school. And all day long, I just wandered the streets of Puebla. I'm like one of those little dogs that runs around without any owners. And I just went walking around. I would find the markets, and I loved hanging out in the markets, where they sell these kind of pretty earrings and things. And I would listen to the Spanish, and I would hear them, and then I would try to think what they're saying, and I would use my dictionary to look it up. And it was tough. But I like to say now that that was my silent period. I did not speak for those 6 months very much. And I listened and I read the dictionary trying to figure out what people were saying, which is what they say babies do. They listen for a year or so before they speak because they can't speak. So that was my silent period. After about 2 weeks of wandering the streets, the family realized I wasn't going to school. And so they decided that I should go to Mexico City every Monday with Esther, who had a job at a bank as a teller in Mexico City. I don't know how this all happened, but I got up one day and they said, come on, you're going to Mexico City. So Esther and I would hop on the big bus and we would go to Mexico City. They had an apartment there near the Angel of Independence there. So that was a memory that I was stuck in my head for years and years. And so I couldn't find the apartment today if I had to. But We stayed in the apartment all week. She went off to the bank. I would wander the streets of Mexico City as an 18-year-old blonde girl from the US who spoke no Spanish. This doesn't sound ideal, does it? But I did listen. And I listened to music. They had a record player, and Paloma was the song, the teacher or the singer that I played that record over and over and over. And it was Barbara Streisand's song Memories in Spanish that I listened to forever. So music was really very key in my understanding some Spanish at that time. So I wandered the streets of Mexico City for the next 4 months, because by then it was about 4 months. And every Friday we would, after she got off of work, we would get back on the bus and go back to Puebla for the weekend. And I would wander around, the neighborhood, get invited to a party and just sit there and be like, I don't know what's going on here, but I'll listen. I did a lot of smiling. People who wanted to practice English would try speaking English with me, and that was fun. But when you're not real fluent yet, and this is the key, when people say get fluent in 30 days, you can learn some phrases that you might need to go into a bar to order a beer, or go into a restaurant, order some food, find a bathroom. Yeah, I could do that because I picked that up over the 6 months. But to have a conversation with somebody, not happening. And I'll tell you, by the time I got done with my 6 months in Mexico, I had an accent. I like to say that's where my accent was born, because I just mimicked what I heard. And people these days tell me that my accent's very good. And some of the Mexicans even say, where are you from? Because you're not from the north like the US, because your accent's too good. And I'm like, yay. Well, I've worked really hard on that, because after I came home from Mexico, I wanted to take classes now, because I hadn't taken any Spanish classes yet. And I ended up going to the local community college, and the classes were so boring. Let me just tell you, boring, conjugating verbs. And I learned that voy ir, which means I'm going to go, was 3 words. I had no idea. It sounds like 1 word to me, voy ir. And so I was like, wow, this is really cutting things into pieces. But the teacher was very boring. So after a semester of that, I decided I needed to join the Navy, because I'm bored here and I'm joining the Navy to see the world. So I joined the Navy, spent 7 years in there, met my husband, we had some kids, moved to Japan, didn't study any more Spanish for years. Finally, we get to Hawaii, and I decide I want to finish my degree that I started way back when, right? And I decided first I was going to be a philosophy major. Then I realized, what am I going to do with that? And I still wanted to learn Spanish. So I was taking Spanish along the way there, and I decided I'll just major in it. That's another story for another day, because that's quite an undertaking also when you are in Hawaii taking Spanish as a degree. So I graduated from the University of Hawaii, and we moved to San Diego. And I said to my son's high school Spanish teacher when I met her at open house, do you think I could just come in and listen, not to his class, but to like your advanced reading, your advanced AP Spanish literature class? Because I loved reading in Spanish, and I knew reading was key. And she was very nice, and she said, of course. And I didn't want to come in while my son was in any class of hers, and that was great. So I went to her other classes. And then I decided I would become a substitute teacher because I had time. And as I substituted in Spanish classes, some of those teachers were so boring. And the students were like, yeah, we know how to conjugate verbs, but nobody can talk. And I was like, there's a problem with the way we teach languages in school. This is not good. So what did I do? Decided to get my teaching credential. So I got a master's degree in education and my teaching credential at the same time. And I became a Spanish teacher. And over the years, I have taken classes on the side because I never felt comfortable teaching Spanish to fluent students. And that's a whole nother story we can talk about later. But I continued my Spanish learning after I graduated as a Spanish degree. And now I'm teaching, but I'm teaching beginners mostly because the other teachers in our school, because I did get hired eventually as a Spanish teacher. That's another one too. But they didn't want to teach the beginners. They only wanted to teach students who already knew how to speak Spanish. So Luisa, you can have the beginners. I love the beginners because as I was teaching them, I learned more ways that would have worked for me had I been my student. And then I, of course, took more classes on how to teach better. And I found Carol Gabb, who is a wonderful, wonderful comprehensible input coach. And then I also studied with Dr. Stephen Krashen, who has, he's a doctor of language and linguistics. And his method of comprehensible input is key. Got to read, you got to listen. And so the more I studied, the more I said, if I'm going to study all this, I should have a degree too. So I got my doctorate in language acquisition from the Walden University online, and I keep learning. So that's my Spanish learning story. And you know what? I disagree with all of those people who say, be fluent in 30 days. I still take Spanish lessons. I still take conversation classes. Depending on where you are in which country, because there's 21 Spanish speaking countries, you're going to learn different words for different things. And it's just, language learning is fun, but it's hard and it's a process. And you cannot learn it in 30 days, 90 days. And yes, I would consider myself fluent in some areas, but that's like in English. I'm not fluent talking medical terms with a doctor. I'm not fluent with an engineer talking engineering terms in English either. So fluent is an interesting word. I am very conversational with a lot of people, and I love it. So I keep working on it. So I hope that's entertaining story for you. It's been a lot of years, and people ask me all the time, how did you learn your Spanish? Well, now you know.
Well, my story certainly is completely different because I have spent my entire life literally learning medicine, family practice, thousands of hours of practicing, taking care of patients, and continuing medical education. And Spanish has always been lurking around. Obviously, you are married to a Spanish teacher, but at work, a lot of my patients, their first language and their understanding was in Spanish. But in that environment, it was mandatory that we had certified interpreters. And then maybe unfortunately for me, when we were living in San Diego and places where Spanish was spoken, like when we were traveling in Spain on the Camino, having my wife by my side, it was easy to say, what did that person say? Or can you order this meal for me? And so my need to learn Spanish was very, very limited. And like I said, at work, it was really important to have somebody that could interpret for me. So when we decided to move to Mexico, it was like, oh no, what in the world am I going to do? But what I've tried to do is slowly and surely try to get enough survival Spanish, and I think I've achieved that to get through the day. That's inadequate when you're living in Mexico full time. So what I've tried to do and what I'm doing now, first I started out like a lot of people nowadays, you'll use the apps on your laptop or your phone, such as Duolingo and Babbel. Actually, I really enjoy Babbel because it's entertaining, it's easy, gives you all the nice, pleasant phrases and survival things you need to get through the day. And supposedly, and having reached this level with them, you can become conversational. I'm not so sure of that as I walk around Puerto Vallarta every single day. Then when we moved here, I actually went to a formal language school. It's called American Tree here in Vallarta, and I actually enjoyed that. What I didn't enjoy as a 70-year-old man is sitting in a classroom 3 times a week for an hour. just sitting there to me was a drudgery. But great instructors there. It was very formal in terms of speaking in the class, doing your homework in a book where you write down and learn the phrases and repeat, and then go over the next day. That's a nice, interesting learning style, and that's how I did it in medicine. But the reality is, if you sit around, and I do this all the time, I listen to the children as we're sitting in different parks, and they're just having conversation with their parents, and the parents are repeating things 1,000 times a day to that child. And I probably need to do that every day, is at least 2 to 3 hours of repetitiveness to become conversational. So right now there's a program that I'm involved with, and I'm learning to pronounce the wording, the alphabets, to build a foundation so that as I continue my learning of Spanish, that I don't sound like just someone who is piecemeal putting together kind of gringo sounds. I want to be authentic. I want to sound good, and I want to have basic conversations. And then hopefully, building that foundation from being basic, I can have a better foundation to have a conversation. That's going to take hundreds of hours. And I'm also doing things like immersion. So as I walk around the street, I'll see a word. I'll open up my phone app, look at it, and see how it fits into what I'm trying to read and understand. And I'm always listening. I'm listening to the sounds, the pronunciation. I'm looking at people's lips. And Spanish, you have to smile a little bit more. You got to open up your mouth. You got to say some things with like O instead of O is in English is really hard, and O in Spanish is more like O. Little things like that, so that I don't sound awkward. But that's my journey. It's going to be trial and error, and then hopefully at the end of the day, I can have a little bit more conversation. And I think most people coming to Spanish speaking countries are more on my level, where you just every day you just grind it out. And then hopefully one day you're in a situation and you have a pleasant conversation with somebody. So that's where I'm at. And please follow me on my journey with learning the Spanish language.
You can see that our journeys to learning language are totally different.
Very different.
And if I had spent the last 40 years working in medicine, I wouldn't speak Spanish much either. But Michael's willing, and I'm so excited that we're here in Mexico where he can have his listening opportunity. And the people here are wonderful. If you make a mistake, they don't correct you.
Right.
But if they don't understand you, they will try to speak English. And so,
and definitely here in Vallarta, because it's a tourist destination, they certainly will speak English to you because they want to either make a sale or help you or just help you get through the day.
and that's the big question that a lot of people have here. They'll say, oh, well, the Mexicans in Puerto Vallarta, they want to practice their English. Well, I've asked several of them because that's a curious thing to me, because I'll be speaking Spanish and then they speak English and then I speak Spanish and they stay in English. And so then I'll say, do you prefer speaking English or Spanish?
Mm-hmm.
And 90% of them will say they prefer Spanish, but they know that there are a lot of people who visit here that don't speak Spanish. And so they just assume that we don't
Right.
speak Spanish, so they speak English. So then I will say, well, could we stay in Spanish because I prefer speaking Spanish?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say there's one store we go to that refuses to speak Spanish with me, and I think it's the boss has told them, gringos, speak English to them,
Yep.
even if they're speaking Spanish. So I don't really like to go to that store. But
generally, people have nice conversations with you, whether it's at the grocery store, the pharmacy,
the Uber drivers,
the Uber drivers, you have great conversations.
I love it. And they're one of the Uber drivers said to me that he prefers the Spanish because most people's Spanish when they are.
Mhm.
No, he prefers to speak to people in English because most of their Spanish is horrible. And he says it's so much easier. And his English was very good. Oftentimes I find that the English that they're trying to use with me is not so good.
Yeah.
And it's a struggle.
I
So
have had some conversations with little kids, by the way,
in Spanish,
and I'm not even sure why, but the little kids will come up, we'll have little basic Spanish conversations, and they seem to really enjoy it. I don't know why.
well, that did happen in Oaxaca.
It did happen in a
This
while.
one little girl came up to him and just started talking to him. I think, was she speaking in Spanish or English?
She was speaking in Spanish, and I had some little basic things, and she had a good time.
They flock to Michael. They're like, "Ooh, let's
Yeah.
go talk to that guy.
Yeah.
He's different." I think he's different. But they're very, very fun here. Very nice. And people appreciate us
Trying
speaking
to learn.
Spanish.
Yep, I
Mhm.
agree.
And why do I keep taking classes? Because you know what? When you take classes in different parts of Mexico, there are different words that are used in different areas.
Mm.
And there are different accents in different areas. So you have to listen more closely.
Actually, just like in English.
Yeah.
A lot of
And plus, when
accents.
you take a Spanish class, like we were in Puebla and I took a Spanish class for 3 weeks, intense Spanish class, you learn the culture of the city that you're in, the history, and what's been going on. And you don't really learn that just walking around the
Walking
city.
around, right.
Yeah. So I do that when we go to Oaxaca. I take the Spanish class there. And I love going to that one. That one's really good. And then we also get to go to the cemeteries for Day of the Dead. They have tours that they take, and it's all very legit. It's not like we're crashing the party. So those are the kinds of experiences that I want to continue to have, which is why I continue to take Spanish classes.
Yeah.
So don't be intimidated. Go out there and learn it. That's our story. We hope you enjoyed it.
Keep learning.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below and let us know what your experience has been like learning Spanish. And I'll leave the name of the Spanish classes that I take online.
Oh, yeah, please do that.
I take 3 hours a day online, and it's really, really fun because you get to pick and choose which hour you want to take. It's not all 3 hours at once. Sometimes I don't take any because I'm busy, but I'll leave that information. No, not link. I haven't figured out how to do links yet.
Okay.
But I'll put the name here so that you can do that if you like. So thanks again for watching.
Ciao.
Have a great day. Hasta luego.